Is where we find NBC News road warrior Shaquille Brewster. Back with us is Wall Street Journal national politics reporter Joshua Jamerson. Also joining us, Democratic strategist Tisch Sussman and Republican political consultant Shermichael Singleton. Shaq, let's start with you on this. And Bernie Sanders' criminal justice reform plan, a lot of details that he released.
Yeah, it's a pretty extensive plan, almost 6,000 words in this newly released criminal justice reform plan. And he's spending the day talking about it and highlighting the key elements of it. Really what it is an expansion of what he talks about on the campaign trail all the time. So he talks about wanting to end for-profit prisons, wanting to end the practice of cash bail and reforming how policing is done in this country. He wants to address the systemic issues that he sees in the criminal justice system that we currently have. I got to ask him about that after a church visit he had earlier today here in Columbia, South Carolina. Listen to what he said.
There's a racist system. People behind bars are disproportionately African-American, Latino. So we are spending a fortune rather than investing in our young people in jobs and education. What we're doing is putting money into jails and incarceration. And that is so crazy that we have got to change it and change it in a very bold way.
And for Sanders, this has been a weekend of outreach to African-American voters. Of course, African-American voters in this state make up 60% of the electorate, so it's a group of voters that he's been targeting all weekend at church visits, having this block party here, and rolling out this criminal justice reform plan.
Shaq, thank you so much. Shaq Brewster there in the field for us, as always, our road warrior following Bernie Sanders. Thank you so much, Shaq. Let's go over to Tisch Sussman. Emily, we are seeing some of the Democratic candidates here trying to take advantage of, advantage is the wrong word, moving on current events that we have seen, unfortunately, in the last 2 weeks. When you look at least this beat, Bernie Sanders, is this the right space that Democratic candidates need to be in, or they need to be a little bit more detailed or less detailed?
Voters are expecting candidates to come out with detailed plans. I think that's what we see from an expansive primary field. People want to see specifics. Look, if a candidate doesn't have a plan to fix something, it shows they don't really think it's a problem. They don't really care about it. So the fact that candidates are starting to come out with more detailed proposals is what people want to see. I think the fact that Sanders is coming out with a criminal justice plan actually pretty late in the way that he's running. I mean, he started running for president the day that Hillary Clinton lost. So the fact that it's taken him this long, especially considering the fact that one of the biggest knocks against him is that he really does not speak to communities of color and does not make any outreach to them, and really just frames all problems as economic rather than systemic and racial. So the fact that he's coming out with it this late, I think does say something about the fact that he's just trying to go after African-American voters in South Carolina because he's not running away with New Hampshire as he should.
One of the concerns that came out, Shermichael, in our NBC News Wall Street Journal poll about this very issue of gun laws is doing too much and too little, almost right down the middle. You saw that, right? And so when we look at the Bernie Sanders proposal here in the criminal justice space, is it the right temperature?
I mean, I think a lot of African-American voters are going to expect to see something from each of those candidates on trying to address some of these systemic issues. One of the issues with Bernie Sanders, though, even going back to his first presidential run, is that he could not find his footing with black voters. And I think some black voters are sort of somewhat interested in some of his ideas, but they weren't necessarily excited about voting for him. And I think as you ask voters who's the best person to defeat someone like Trump, I think some of the first names that come to mind, not just one but first, are Biden, you think of a Warren, you think of a Kamala Harris when you ask African-American voters directly. And so I think this is an effort by the Sanders campaign to somewhat change those dynamics.
I'm going to go to also the topic that I with here, Joshua. When you look at the approval ratings for the Democratic candidates, and the one who took a big hit, as I underlined in the introduction to our discussion here, is the former vice president. When you look at Biden's popularity, I mean, 36 points, that's a huge swing. He has very much seen a change. What has caused that change, and is it a real detriment to his candidacy here?
Well, I think it's not dissimilar from what we saw in 2016 when Hillary Clinton left the State Department. She experienced some of her most high approval ratings over her career, once she became a front runner for the Democratic nomination and started taking the types of bars from Senator Sanders as well as from some of his supporters, her approval rating starts to go down. I think that's, we were talking in our office about this the other day. I think it's just maybe indicative of where we are as a country when people start injecting themselves in the presidential race. We're a divided country, and people are going to have split opinions on that person, maybe no matter who it is.
Yeah, and the other question we have to lay on top of that is viability, right? Who can win? For Democratic voters, that's a big part of their calculations here. Shaq, one of the issues that we're watching also is the economy, right? We saw a week when we just look at the Dow, the month overall. We've lost almost 1,000 points in August, and last week's ups and downs, huge. Look at these numbers, swings in green and red. When you're there on the ground with the Sanders campaign, how is the economy being discussed, Shaq?
It's one of those things that comes up in his regular stump speech where he talks about jobs, and he talks about wanting to raise the minimum wage, that $15 an hour minimum wage, and that's something that he frames in this economic message where he said to a voter a little bit earlier, it does that you have these high or low unemployment numbers if you're working multiple jobs at a time. So it's that element of going back to his stump speech, going back to his normal proposals. That's what they're trying to do. One other thing that the campaign is mentioning is this trade war. Senator Sanders got to talk with reporters a little bit earlier today, and he mentioned this trade war that's going on and the impact that it has there. He says that this is something that people understand, and people and voters, his voters and supporters would understand.
To you on this, Emily, some of the numbers that came out in terms of the president's approval rating, in terms of handling of the economy, down only 2 points since April. But if this is a real concern, and we've been talking about the yield curve all week, right? If this is a real problem where we're going to face a recession potentially in 2020, what does this mean for the president? What does it mean for the Democrats, right?
Every report coming out of the White House is that the president is basically freaking out because he doesn't think he's going to be able to run on the economy the way that he was banking on. It does provide an opening for Democrats to be able to be more specific about their policies and show how it can actually play out to help real people's lives. That is generally how Democrats run on the economy already. They talk about specific policies. They talk about minimum wage. They talk about family leave policies. They talk about the ability to keep insurance, what Obamacare did, the ability to have insurance while working multiple jobs. But that doesn't speak to like this top line of, quote, the economy, the way that Trump and Republicans always have. This provides an opening for Democrats to be able to do both at the same time. Speak about specific policies that are kitchen table issues that help people's lives, and also talk about the economy broadly to hit him where he's no longer strong.
Yeah, sure, Michael, those numbers, we all